Thanks for tuning into the For Those Made to Do podcast. We are your hosts, Mandy Sahota
and Bianca Pavel. This podcast is all about the doers who have achieved career success in the UAE and the stories that go with it.
In this episode of For Those Made to Do Corporate Finance, Bianca and I had a great conversation with Stephen George, Associate Director at Deloitte Middle East, hearing firsthand Stephen's perspective on the future of the region, particularly the 2030 vision, and are given a taste of the type of projects he's currently working on. We cover themes of how integral relationship building is if you are considering a future as a consultant, as well as adapting to the culture of doing business in the Middle East.
If you're curious about the GCC mega projects in development right now, how the role of the consultant is being transformed by new tech, and how early you need to start engaging with employers to land your first consulting role, then put your headphones on and tune into this episode. We hope you enjoy it. Welcome back, everyone, to a new episode of For Those Made to Do. Today's topic is finance, and as many of our listeners are currently in business or in business school, I believe it needs no introduction. With so many Holt students interested in corporate finance, we decided to dissect this particular topic today and understand what it takes to succeed in this extremely competitive but very rewarding space. To introduce us to the ins and outs, we have invited in our studio a close friend of Holt, Stephen George, current Associate Director at Deloitte Middle East, with a wealth of experience in advising private clients and government in both the UK and the UAE in the defense, security, and nuclear space. So, Stephen, good morning. Thanks for joining us. How are you feeling today?
Good morning, Bianca. Yeah, very good. Very good to be here. And you kindly supplied me with caffeine, so I'm ready to go.
Absolutely. Yeah, we got you all ready.
Amazing. Let's dive right into it. Finance is such a big topic. We thought we would start by learning a bit more about you and your career to date. So if you could give us a bit of an overview.
Of course, yeah. So I am, well, in fact, next week I'll be 10 years in this industry. So I spent 3 years at one of our competitors. And then basically since then, I've been with Deloitte. So it's over, I think it's around 6.5 years now in corporate finance in our, what we call our government and infrastructure business. It's been really fascinating. I'm sure we'll come on to it a lot more, but I really enjoy working with government and usually working with some of government's really big problems or important challenges, because that's when the projects are big enough that they seek our help. So yeah, it's been a really good 10 years.
Amazing. And before we get into the heavy stuff and all the numbers, I was quite interested to know, do you have a morning ritual to start your day, given that consulting is renowned for its long days? For those of our listeners who are interested in going into this space, how do you start the day?
I would like to be able to tell you I do yoga and then I go for a run and then I have like, I don't know, chia something or other, but I don't do any of that. If I'm in Dubai, I try and take my kids to school if I possibly can before I go to work. And that's a nice thing because I don't usually get to see them in the evening. If I'm traveling, then basically I just try and get to the hotel breakfast in a reasonable amount of time. And that's kind of it, to be honest.
I love a hotel
Good
breakfast.
practice, yeah.
When you don't have to make it for yourself, it tastes so much better, honestly. All right. So unlike our previous guests, you're quite new to Dubai. What attracted you to Dubai and how has your first year been?
Yeah, so it's been really good. Overall, it's been exciting and rewarding, but definitely challenging at the start. I think the things that attracted me were firstly a new experience kind of personally. So I am 32 years old and I spent 31 of those years in the southeast of England and could only speak English. So the chance to come to a different region, meet a different set of people, completely different people than I would have normally come into contact with was a really big draw. Then the family setup that you can have here and the kind of environment that you can create for yourself and for your family and the lifestyle you can have in Dubai was a big attraction. And then kind of professionally, the market in the UAE and the GCC and just the whole Middle East region actually is just kind of booming. So I saw it as a chance to, I suppose, speed up or accelerate my career progression and the projects I was working on.
So you spent 9 out of your 10 years in the UK
Exactly.
and 1 year here in Dubai. So we're very curious to understand what you think the main differences, but also similarities between the two countries are in terms of corporate finance and financial consulting in general.
A lot of the job is the same. Obviously, I've moved with Deloitte, so there's consistency between the two offices. There are differences, but there's a lot of consistency in the way we run our projects and the type of people we employ and all that kind of stuff. So I think from that point of view, it was actually probably an easier move than some people have where they change companies or it's a completely different job. But in terms of the actual consulting or corporate finance projects, there's a very different work culture with some of the clients. So to maybe expand on that a little bit more, in the UK, I typically worked with civil servants, or I won't get into the technical detail of UK government, but other government employees basically. And they were the clients, and they were great clients. I really enjoyed it, but they would work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, and that was just how they worked. And so even if you were working earlier than them and later than them, your week was very, very structured. In the Middle East, it is less structured. So there's a couple of particular problems, or not problems, but just challenges. And it took me a few months to get my head around. So one is the UAE is a Monday to Friday work week, and most of the rest of the GCC is a Sunday to Thursday work week.
Yeah.
So if you have a few different projects on the go, actually all of a sudden you're working Sunday to Friday, which is, something you just have to try and manage. The other thing is there's just a kind of all hours culture, work culture with some of the clients, particular senior locals, because, this is their country and a lot of what they're doing is kind of changing their country for the future. It's super important. They will want to speak to you at midnight. They will want to speak to you at whenever. If something occurs to them that's really important, then they want to talk about it. So again, it's just something I've had to kind of get used to. And what you end up doing is trying to balance that. So maybe on a Friday you finish at lunchtime because you have a few calls on a Sunday. Or maybe what I typically do is leave the office at what I think is a sensible time, go and have dinner with my kids, put them to bed, maybe have a glass of wine, and then do some stuff after that. So just try and manage it a bit. But it was a big change. And then I think the last thing I would say on this is just the nature of the projects here at the moment is of a different magnitude to the UK. Some of the projects, the ideas, the ambition is just in a different league.
Can I interject there a little bit? Is that due to the maturity of the market, say, like a country like the UK? And here, obviously, when I'm speaking about Dubai and UAE, I always refer to it as it's still an emerging market in my eyes. And I always say the country's in the accelerator phase,
Yeah,
if you were to look at it like a startup. So could you just speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, so maybe if I just give a couple of examples. This week, I don't know if your students or your listeners follow UK politics, they probably don't, but the UK government has decided not to proceed with some of High Speed 2, which was an important railway connecting the different regions of the country. I think if you compare that with some of the transport projects in the Middle East, where we want to double the passenger numbers of our airport, or we want to have, a brand new railway, or we want vertical takeoff and landing, flying taxis, and the ambition is just completely different.
Yeah.
And you're right, it is the maturity of the market. A country like the UK is kind of steady state. They just want to tick along without doing too much wrong.
Yeah. And it's almost they're looking more inwards, where I feel like in the UAE they're looking so outward and beyond that as well. It's refreshing for me because I'm also from the UK as well, and HS2 is coming to Birmingham, but it's not going to Manchester. So
Exactly.
So, yeah, just on that note of how involved the government here is in creating new projects and driving innovation and transforming the country at an accelerated pace, what is your take on that? What's been your experience in being a part of working with those people who have this big vision?
Yeah, I won't overplay my importance. I probably don't quite work with the people who have the big vision. I probably work one or two levels down.
Just making it happen, right? You're one of the people that help them bring it to life.
Exactly. It's really, really exciting. And it kind of goes to the heart of what we do and why we're here in the market. If you take another GCC country, if you take Saudi Arabia, their Vision 2030 kind of set out in a really broad but also detailed way how they wanted to change their country. And there's different aspects to this. It's privatization. It's bringing industries so that they have a presence in Saudi and they're not just importing strategic inputs to their different industries. And they want to change tourism. They want to change, fundamentally change their country. A lot of those projects are of a scale that they can't do it on their own. So they look to advisors, to consultants to help them, and it's really rewarding. I think it's also particular to the, I suppose, the type of governments that they have in the region, where they can set out a vision and go and do it, and no one, and if they want to do it, they will do it, and no one is going to get in the way of that. Which it's really, as someone trying to get a project done, it's really refreshing and it's quite exciting.
Cool. So I think we've spoken at a high level in terms of the scope of your role. We wanted to get a little bit more granular. Can you describe a financial project that you've been involved in within the past year?
Yes, absolutely. So if I give you one example in the GCC, so as I said, where we get involved in projects, it's usually because they are of a scale or a significance that requires it. There's an airport in the region that wants to almost triple the number of passengers in the next 7 years, which is obviously an enormous undertaking. And there's a huge amount that goes into making that happen across government. But specifically, they wanted our help to understand, okay, if you have a terminal now at your airport, but you're going to triple your passengers, you need 3 terminals, or you need the equivalent capacity of 3 terminals. And if you want that in 7 years, and they take a few years to build, actually you need to start work on that now. So if you're going to do that massive project, how do you get the money and how do you smooth out the money over time so that that's an affordable and sustainable project? And that's really where we come in. So we often work with technical advisors who are kind of engineers, people like that, and they'll say, okay, a new airport that does this costs this much. And then as the corporate finance advisors, we'll come in and say, okay, so if you need that much money, these are some of the sources, some of the places you can go to get it, particularly local banks, but also export credit agencies. So for example, if your new airport needs a really expensive piece of kit that maybe is made in Germany or Japan, the German or Japanese governments might be willing to arrange some finance for you, a much more competitive rate than a bank. So thinking about all these kind of things so that you can put the package of your airport together in the most cost-effective way, but also in a way that you can afford over a 10, 15, 20-year period.
Okay, well, I have to give a disclaimer. I mean, finance is something that I avoid, I think. So I think this conversation is going to definitely open my eyes in a lot of ways. So what are the key milestones that you've successfully completed to reach this point in your career? Because you're working on these large-scale projects at such a high level, like you said, outside of the cultural norms that you're used to.
Yeah.
So in order to kind of have this toolkit to be able to navigate in this area, could you just speak us to like certain points in time where you acquired information, both academically and on the job learning as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose for your students' point of view, I actually studied law, nothing to do with finance. It was business law, so it was kind of contract commercial law. Quite quickly into that degree, I realized I didn't want to be a lawyer. But there was an element of it which I enjoyed, which was a kind of structured approach to thinking about a problem, but also the kind of negotiation element to it as well. So that led me to think about what else could I do in professional services more broadly. And I actually started off in consulting, management consulting at one of our competitors. So I suppose the first achievement would be getting that job, because it's super hard to get your first job in the industry. And then spending those 3 years getting to know, just being a professional and doing a project. And it was less financial than the work I do now, but it gave me a kind of base toolkit. And over that time, I realized what I really enjoyed was working with government on, trying to save government money or trying to get government a better deal or these kind of things. And then use that experience and the knowledge I had from working with government on other projects to pivot slightly into the career I'm in now. So I think I would probably say, if you asked me a particular legal case that I'm supposed to know, I would not be able to tell you. I would say almost maybe 90% of what I know and apply, I've learned in the job rather than previously.
And from your background is a career consultant, so from graduation onwards, you've been in the consulting industry. So in terms of them grooming you to get to where you are today, how much kind of learning do you have to do outside of the on-the-job learning? Do you have to do a lot of kind of courses and things like that, or has it just primarily been your exposure?
Yeah, it depends. It depends slightly exactly where you are in the firms. Often the graduate schemes include professional qualifications. So I have done some accountancy exams, and that will be typical, or sometimes you'll do the CFA, which is Chartered Financial Analyst, or some other relevant qualifications. And I think I would say that is important. And there's a requirement probably in your first 3 or 4 years to get to a base technical skill level. And that could be through the professional qualifications, or it could just be you're lucky enough to work on some really complex and exciting projects. And then after that, it's much less about learning technical concepts or, what's the formula for this. It becomes all about managing clients, building relationships with clients, building relationships with the partners and the senior people in the firm. And then I suppose as you go up, building relationships with your teams and, the people who are where you were 5 years ago, so that they're motivated, they understand what's required of them. You create some fellowship to an extent. So ideally, you would have people in your team that want to work with you. And the next project comes along and you have the pick of the people that you want to work with because they want to work with you. That's kind of how you progress through the firm, is having some mentors or some sponsors that can see that you're doing that and they kind of pull you up, but also you have people that are helping you bring yourself up.
Very much like reputational then in that instance.
Yeah.
And personal branding. We were talking a lot about this in our past episodes of how important it is to network and to create a brand that people recognize and that can kind of fill the room when you're not there. Because when big decisions are being made and you're not in the room, and in a lot of cases you won't be there, you want people to remember you for how good you are at what you do. And you want to have, like you said, sponsors and advocates that can vouch for you and can pull you into the room when it's the case.
Absolutely. And I would also add, it's not too early to start practicing that from your first week. When you finish your business degree or your MBA, you won't be meeting CEOs the next week, but you can practice. You can go to. So in fact, friend of Holt, I met Bianca through a professional network that had an event with Holt, and that was 6 or 7 years ago.
5-6 years ago in London,
Exactly. And the reason I was taking part in those events and that network was to practice with people at my own level in different industries and different firms. Just building contacts and speaking to people and getting to know people. And that serves you really well. And then it's much more natural when all of a sudden you're a manager and you need to go and have a difficult conversation because you're just used to speaking to people.
Amazing. And I love that, because I think this message needs to be reiterated again and again and again, because it's not the easiest thing to do. And getting out of your comfort zone and doing that is hard for many people, myself included. But then when you put yourself in that environment all the time, you are pushing yourself to that next level, and it does pay off eventually. So thank you for sharing. I'd quite like to ask, do you see a career outside of consulting, where in the terms of corporate finance?
Yeah.
Would you see yourself client side at any point?
I have thought about it. Over the years at different points in my career. There's kind of some natural jumping off points. So I think one of them is 3 or 4 years in, when you've got that base technical skill set. To be blunt about it, at that point you can go into industry and earn more money. That's what my wife did. So I actually met my wife at work and then she went into industry around that time. And there's a lot to be said for that. There's another jumping off point when you've got some kind of management experience. So maybe you're 5 or 6 years in. And again, I thought about it. The thing that has kept me in consulting or corporate finance is I really love that I'm working on a different project every 3 months or 6 months in a different place with different people. I haven't got bored of that yet. And I honestly don't think I will. So if you had asked me 5 years ago, I probably would have said I will have left within the next few years. But now I think I'm probably going to do this forever.
Wow. Okay. I guess as well, like you can see like the level of impact that your work will be having, and you probably won't see it now, but you will in like 10 years' time. I can imagine that's going to be
Yeah,
quite satisfying.
and in the particular team that I'm in, working on government projects and big infrastructure projects, it's there's kind of a geeky side of me, which a new airport gets built, and that is obviously I didn't have a shovel and a hard hat, but to be part of it is just quite rewarding.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And just to bring you back to something you mentioned before around the team, I'm just curious about what you're looking for at an entry level in the team, because it's so important, like you said, for anyone just starting out in the industry to put themselves out there and to start networking and to start showing their capabilities. But before they even make it to that point, getting into a consulting firm is incredibly competitive. So, as an associate director, you're recruiting people and you're constantly working with people who are at the beginning of their careers. What do you see in the winners or the people that are doing well? And what do you look for before even hiring them, bringing them into the team?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think there are some themes across the people that we hire that your students and listeners can learn from. So I would say most of the people that get a place on one of the big firms' graduate schemes, which is typically the entry point, they have started thinking about how they achieve that probably 2 years before they achieve it. So they'll be on, first of all, on the website and on the Instagram, on the Twitter of those firms. And occasionally there's events that happen. And actually, especially at the larger firms, the careers teams are very active, and at universities or at particular locations, they will put on events. So a lot of the people who are successful are going to those events and speaking to people and trying to understand a little bit more than just, I want to be a consultant. And then what happens is, as they do their application or they have their first interview, it just comes across straight away that they genuinely understand the nature of the thing that they're applying for. Because to be more blunt than I would be to their face, probably half of the people that get to that point, they don't really understand what it is they're interviewing for.
I mean, we do see that a lot.
Yeah.
I think a lot of students like the idea of consulting and they like the label of management consultant. But I think if you were to really question someone and dig deep as to their understanding of what management consulting is, I don't believe that many of them will be able to kind of give you that answer. So it's very, very interesting that you bring this up. And I hope this resonates to them.
Yeah, I think there's the image of the consultant out there. I don't know exactly when it was built. I'm going to blame Hollywood again for it a little bit. I feel like we all grew up with that image of the consultant who has a briefcase and walks into a business meeting and, provides advice, life-changing advice, and walks away.
Yeah.
And I think everybody wants to have that. And I think at the core of it is impact. Whenever we ask our students, why do you want to go into consulting? They say that they want to have an impact and they want to do it quick and they want to have an impact that ramifies across different industries and clients, almost similar to what you were saying, Stephen, that you don't see yourself leaving consulting because you get to work on so many exciting projects constantly with different clients, right? So I think there is that I don't want to limit myself to one particular day-to-day kind of the same role, and I want to impact more.
Yeah, and I think also, if I speak about myself, when I joined consulting, I kind of knew that I wanted to work on problem solving and difficult or interesting projects, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just knew that I wanted to be challenged, I wanted to learn, I wanted to kind of test myself, I suppose. And I think there will be some students that know I want to be a rocket scientist or I want to be this or that, and that's completely fine. But there'll be other students who don't know yet. They just know they want to work on interesting things, and that's completely fine. And if you were to express that in an interview, that's, completely fine as well. And like I say, the firms expect people to leave after a few years or maybe after a few years more. They don't expect everyone who joins to want to do 30 years. So you can be completely upfront about that, but just explain why you think you going through that learning experience is going to be beneficial for the firm because you have something to bring, you have perspective, you're keen, you understand the task.
All right, so let's move on to some trends that you're seeing here in the region. Like we say in every episode, this podcast is very focused on the UAE and the GCC, and particularly we're zooming in on Dubai because we want to demystify the city a little bit and understand what's growing. So what are some key trends in financial consulting that you're seeing in the UAE right now?
Yeah, so I think this is basically why I moved to the region. And like I was saying before, the scale of the projects is extraordinary. I think the trends over the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years will still be mega projects and kind of new developing, if it's Dubai, developing Palm Jebel Ali and kind of new Dubai down to Dubai South and Expo and that whole extending the city, and ultimately plans for the new airport down there as well. If you're talking about the GCC more broadly, the big mega projects that are going to, in Saudi, you're talking about whole new cities. In Qatar, they want to completely restructure and privatize and bring in fresh thinking to some of their big government-owned assets. You have real significant fundamental changes. If you're then looking beyond that kind of 5 to 10 year horizon, I think that the changes are going to flip from big projects into digital transformation. So if you think about the brand new city you've just built in Saudi, for example, in 10 years' time, that brand new city is going to be whatever the follow-on to superfast broadband is everywhere. It'll be flying taxis or drones or whatever. It'll be new modes of transport, new modes of working and living. And at the heart of all of those things is going to be technology. And, selfishly for me, I'm thinking about what are the massive contracts with big tech firms that are going to need some advice. But, for anyone who's interested in transformation, I think that will be the theme of the 2030s in the region.
Yeah, that sounds exciting, right? So actually on that topic of tech and transformation, I think there are two angles here. On one side, this fast-paced transformation is changing the kind of projects you're working on, right? So drones and expansion and perhaps new areas to work on. On the other side, tech might also be changing how you do your job and how much of your current tasks are going to still be there in the next 5 to 10 years. And, when we talk about AI and what we've been calling the beast on this podcast, ChatGPT and, generative AI and big data and all of these kind of big transformations, we're thinking of how that impacts the day-to-day work. And especially with financial consulting, we're interested to get your perspective on this. Do you think that AI coming into the workforce is changing and will be changing the job of the consultant?
Yes, I do. So ChatGPT has kind of changed everything. I think I'm just about old enough that I'm going to get away with it. But for your listeners, they're probably not. So yeah, it is going to change. I mean, all of the firms over the last probably 9 months have been frantically trying to work out how do we take this and apply this to what we do. And I think some firms will come up with different answers to that and be broader than just financial consulting. This is going to be everything in professional services. But the way we see it in our team, in the short term, I think it gives us a massive opportunity to automate some of the tasks that we do that up till now have been quite manual. So if I just explain in a few seconds the kind of life cycle of a project, and then I can maybe explain how AI or the beast comes into this. So typically we will hear from one of our clients, probably just an automated email. We need some help with X. Can you do a proposal? How would you solve this problem? How much would it cost? Right? And that, at the most simple
Basic
level.
yeah.
And in order to answer that question, obviously we think about the problem and we come up with an answer, but we also include the CVs of the relevant people. We include the credentials of the projects we've done before in that industry or on a similar problem. We'll include a plan for the project. And all of these things are quite manual to produce. But if you then apply ChatGPT to that, or, a future version of AI. Maybe you can just have a database of the million proposals you've ever done.
AI can cherry pick a few solutions.
Hey, AI, this is the scope of work. Can you give me all the relevant CVs and all the relevant projects and give me an example plan of how we do this, answering this question before? And then you will still need to review that and make it bespoke to the task and apply your intelligence, but you've probably shortcutted 60% of the work.
Yeah.
So that's right at the start. And then as you go through the project, there are things that won't change. So we will still, this is where I think relationship management is fundamental. We will still have meetings with clients and workshops with clients and understand their challenges. And that will be a very human process. But there are other products that we produce, like board presentations or business cases or, investment proposals to banks or lenders or whoever. And again, these things, once you've done them a few hundred times, AI can learn, well, what are the things that need to go in one of those products? So I think it's going to fundamentally change the way we work, probably at a more junior level than at a more senior level.
And I think that kind of begs the question of, will jobs be cut? Will they disappear? Will they transform? Because a lot of people listening to your answer right now, a lot of grads are thinking, oh no, if AI is doing the presentations, what am I doing?
But then also, is that how you built your learning in the first place, by doing that granular work?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where do those skills come from to get to that senior level? Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I think what probably happens is, I don't think any jobs get cut. I think over the next few years, the people who are currently learning will learn sort of how I did. And then as we are recruiting, let's say it's our graduate scheme for, 2028 or 2030, maybe we have less consultants than we used to, but we have a whole team of coders that we never used to have.
Yeah.
And they need to understand how our projects work in order to do the thinking that goes into the AI. So they will still need to understand, whether it's tax or whether it's audit or whether it's corporate finance, but they will then apply it differently. So I don't think it will be fewer jobs. I just think it will be different jobs.
So with that in mind, what does the future of corporate finance look like, in your opinion?
I think to a large extent, corporate finance will always be about building relationships with people and then solving their problems, basically by helping them find the cash that they need over a period of time. That's at the core of the job. That will always be there, because regardless of AI or the metaverse or anything else, cash, money is still going to exist.
Yeah.
And where there is money, you will find people trying to help people with their money. But I think that the future looks a bit different, kind of as we discussed on AI, but also what I would like to think is what we are increasingly doing is not just coming to a problem and saying, here is how you raise the money and here is how you spend it, or here is the company that you should buy, or whatever it is, and then leaving. Increasingly what we're trying to do is say, here is the company that you should buy, and here is our team from consulting who can help you integrate that company. And the person who started the deal stays involved because you have the continuity of the advice and the relationship. And then, maybe 5 years down the line, it's now time to sell that part of the business or a different part of the business or whatever. So I think corporate finance will increasingly become a broader, or at least the start of a broader relationship across professional services.
With a long-term view of servicing a client rather than, here's a solution to your current problem.
Exactly, yeah. Well, that's certainly my hope and my ambition, yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, I think this is a good time to draw the conversation to a close. I think for me personally, the conversation was very informative, and it was great to hear your unique point of view, given, how new you are to the region. And as someone who's in the middle of all this transformation as well, thank you for providing us with insights into the finance world. We always close off the episode with a bit of a teaser to what we call the wildcard question. And we like to kind of announce it in the main episode, so it gives our listeners an opportunity to think about how they would answer the question themselves, and then they'll tune into the bonus episode next week to hear how you approach the wildcard question. So In our first episode, we discussed that the ESGs are core topics for business education. In your opinion, how much should sustainability weigh when private or public entities make spending decisions in the space of defence, security, and nuclear power? A bit loaded.
Big question.
Yes. So for our listeners, please tune into our bonus episode next week. And we will leave it there for today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Stephen. This is great.